The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good day to everyone, and thank you so much for a great turnout for this webinar. And I know that GDPR is coming, and the turnout for this webinar proves that everyone is on task and preparing, which is fantastic. So that is great news. My name is Derek Melber. I will be your host and presenter for the day. We do have some people in the background that are answering your questions, so please, if you have any questions along the webinar, please use your go-to webinar panel, and you can post your questions, and someone will answer those as we go along. If for some reason we have an abundance of questions and we can't get to them all during our time, we will send you questions afterwards, but normally we can get to all the questions because we're answering them along the way. This is being recorded as well, so you should be receiving an email within the next couple of days with a link to the recorded webinar, so please keep an eye out for that. That's a great way for you to come back if you have any questions, if anything occurred and you wanted to see it again, or if you want to share it with someone else, please do that as well. A little bit of logistics about me as we get started here. As I said, my name is Derek Melber. I am the technical evangelist for the Active Directory Solutions team here at ManageEngine. And what that means is I get to go around the world talking with administrators, meeting new people, helping organizations. I just got back from a 6-week trip through some of the US, but mostly in Europe. Also dove down to Israel, and that was a very, very, very great trip. Got to meet a lot of great people, and actually talked quite a bit about GDPR, which I'll be bringing up during the webinar today, as everyone is getting prepared for GDPR and some different things that are happening along the lines of compliance in the EU. Also, I want to point you to some resources. We don't have a ton of time today together, but I want to leave you with some resources. Some of the resources are available on our webpage. All of these resources are absolutely free. So let me jump out to our webpage and talk a little bit about the resources we have available. If you go to just ManageEngine.com, and then go to support and blogs, you'll see that we have some blogs out here across all different topics. But what I want to point you to is actually our Active Directory blog. We have an Active Directory blog that is updated weekly. And what we try to do is answer a lot of the questions that we see around the world in short, little matter-of-fact blogs. What I try to do is come in and write a blog that's no more than 5 minutes. You'll see a bunch of different things here about Active Directory, and you can do searches on security, you can do searches on group policy, you can do searches on Active Directory itself. Just a really good resource for you to come out and take advantage of. And again, we try to blog every week if possible. And lately, there's actually been multiple blogs a week, which is very, very nice. Another resource I want to point you to is actually available also from our main landing page. If you hover over products and you go to the lower left-hand corner, you'll see this link, Security Hardening for Active Directory. This is a page that we put together a couple of years ago, and it really is a fantastic place for you to come and get information about how to secure Active Directory, your domain controllers, and even your Windows servers. We've been talking about this page and the contents of this page now in webinars and seminars, and the feedback has just been overwhelming. And we just want to make sure that everybody is aware of this information. If you come to any of these areas that are in blue here and you click, you'll actually see that there are subcategories. And it's, again, just in the idea of helping you to secure your environment. So what I recommend you do is come in here and every week pick a new topic, go through the blogs and secure those areas. And in the end, you're going to have a much better secured environment. Finally, another link that I want to point you to, a resource, is our new dummies book for securing privileged access. You can download the book for free here. It's not a long read, but I think the information that's available in it is extremely powerful. You can actually share the PDF with others, and maybe you work with some people that don't understand why privileged access is so important and why we need to secure it. But this book really walks you through that in a very easy to read manner, kind of shedding some light on some things. And you never know, maybe as you read the book, you might pick up a tip or two. I tried to put some really good detailed tips in the book. So probably can get through the book in about an hour. It's not that long of a read. So that's another great resource for you. So those are some resources that are available from our website. Also, I want to point you to my email address, which is derek@manageengine.com. As some of you know, I probably saw some of you in the last couple of weeks in Europe when I was there. I really enjoyed questions. It's a way for me to learn. It's also a way for me to help you if you have any particular problems. I am an MVP. I think this is my 17th year or 16th year as being an MVP. And I know a lot of people that know other information than I do, as well as people directly at Microsoft. So if you have any questions about Active Directory, group policy, security, this is just a great opportunity for you to take advantage of that and my connections. Finally, I'll end on our world tour. We have completed our 2017 world tour with a huge push. I went to 10 countries in the last 3.5 weeks, which was just extremely rewarding. Got to see a lot of old friends and meet some new friends and help many administrators throughout the world. So that was a great end to the 2017 world tour. And we're actually working right now diligently on the 2018 world tour that is coming. Many of you that are connected to this webinar that are in Europe, please keep an eye out for early 2018. We will be coming back to many countries in 2018 to talk about a variety of different topics. Every year we come up with different topics for our seminars, and it's been a great success helping administrators and organizations, and we will be back. So keep an eye out for those dates. They will be coming out very, very soon, and I hope to see all of you there. So let's move on and talk about GDPR. For those of you that are new to compliance regulations, which, as I've been asking this question throughout Europe, throughout the year even, many administrators haven't had to deal with compliance regulations in Europe, and definitely haven't had to deal with auditors. So I wanted to shed some light on some of those things as we go through material today, because it is a radical change from normal behavior of running a network and dealing with administering Active Directory. When you have someone constantly asking you questions, constantly asking you for reports, it becomes another burden for you. So what we want to do is we want to shed some light on what you might expect, and also give you some solutions on how to prepare for GDPR, so that when mid-May comes along, you are up and running and you are ready to go. So what I want to do is I first want to start off with some concepts around how to prepare for GDPR, and then I want to actually get into some of the details of GDPR and flush out some things that we feel are things that you need to pay attention to and really latch on to, so that you can provide solutions for that. So within GDPR, they're very, very strict and trying to get your attention with regard to making sure that you are compliant with GDPR. GDPR basically says that if you are found guilty of not complying with GDPR, then you are going to be fined up to 20 million euro, or 4% of your annual income for the organization. That can be very, very steep. So I don't think they're joking, but certainly these are some very steep numbers, and I think someone has to be really negligent to get to this point. However, it is the reality of what we're dealing with, so keep that in mind. Many of the compliance regulations in the United States have some numbers associated with them, but most people aren't fined. They are given the opportunity to make sure that they become compliant, but if they are completely negligent over and over again, that's when they get fined. And there are some steep fines with the other regulations, such as HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, and some of those other compliance regulations as well. So what we need to do is we need to prepare for GDPR, but we have to know what we're preparing for. We have to understand the ground rules. We have to understand what GDPR is putting upon us to make sure that we become compliant. So with regard to the ground rules, we have to understand some terms. Now, first off, I'm going to give you some action items as we go through the webinar, as I always do. And the first thing is I'm going to ask that each of you read GDPR thoroughly. It's not that long of a compliance regulation, and you have to understand some of the terms. So let's go over some of those terms. Now, throughout my presentation, you are going to see that sometimes I quote GDPR exactly, and other times I kind of just summarize what I think is important. The reason I'm doing that is within GDPR, there's some terms that we must understand fully, and there are some things that we must take exactly as it's written from GDPR to make sure that we are being compliant. So let's first of all talk about personal data. This is what we're protecting. This is what GDPR is all about. It's personal data, okay? Now, personal data, according to GDPR, is any information relating to an identified or identifiable natural person. What does that mean? Well, natural person here means a human, right? And that human is either someone that we know, or we know it's a human, but we haven't really identified that particular human, but we know it's information about a human, okay? So this idea is really broad. We're dealing with information related to a human. That's it. That's what it is. What information? Information. And they're pretty general about that because they want to protect information about people, okay? Now, you also notice that it is identifiable natural person is one who can be identified directly or indirectly. Okay, so now we get to, okay, I can find this person, but it might actually not be directly identifying that person. So you can see how vague this is getting. This is very common for compliance regulations. And then they get into some details. They say, okay, the name, ID number, location, an online identifier such as some type of social media like a Twitter account or LinkedIn account or something like that. And then they get into more factors, right? Physical, physiological, mental. My gosh, this is really getting a little crazy, right? But what I'm trying to tell you is you need to protect data related to people. That's the general form, okay? Everything related to people. All right. Then we get into processing. Okay, so first we have the data. And of course, the data we're collecting, and then we're going to do something with the data. Well, that something that you do with the data is processing. So we have information, and then we do something with the information. Here's where I wish they were really just more direct. Because what they want to say is any information related to people, and if you do anything with it. That's really what this can say, because that's what they mean. You just saw the list of the personal data, right? Even mental information, right? Well, processing says any operation or set of operations which is performed on personal data or sets of personal data, okay? So anything you do with personal data is processing. Then it goes through the complete list, examples, right? These are the examples that are given in GDPR, exactly. So if you do anything with the data, that's processing, and processing is part of GDPR that you have to protect what you're processing. Now, another aspect of GDPR is this idea of consent. Now, I experienced this firsthand when I was just traveling in Europe, because, of course, when I travel, I try to connect to Wi-Fi whenever possible because I'm roaming. And when I'm roaming, when I connect to Wi-Fi, there are new pages when you are connecting because it's gathering information about you, right? It's gathering my email address, it might gather which country I'm from and stuff like that. Well, that's personal data. So now when you actually connect to Wi-Fi, many organizations have already put in this consent idea. Now, again, this idea of consent gets pretty specific, but it's also pretty generic. Now, exactly from GDPR, consent of the data subject means any freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous indication of the data subject's wishes by which he or she, by a statement or by a clear affirmative action, signifies agreement. So you are responsible for being extremely clear of what you are going to be doing with the data and giving the user every opportunity to either negate giving you the personal data or agree to give you the personal data. This is the consent. Most of the time in our world in IT, this consent is going to be through a web page, right? It's going to be through a phone, a web page, anything. Whenever you're gathering the information. Yes, it also means if you're gathering it manually, let's say people fill out forms, GDPR has to be there as well because it's just data. However you're collecting the data, you are going to have this consent that is very clear. Now, let's talk about auditing. Let's talk about after May. You are going to be asked to prove that you are giving this consent at this level. So the auditors are going to be asking you to see the web page, all the web pages, any forms, anything that is consent, because they are going to have to prove that you're meeting GDPR in this consent. Now, today there is a directive. The directive is very different than the GDPR consent. The directive left open the possibility of an opt-out consent, which basically means, yeah, I didn't really click a button, but I was okay with that to give them the information. No longer does that work, okay? GDPR says both the consent must be clearly distinguishable and the withdrawal of the consent also has to be easy. So when you get spammed because of information, and let's say that you're an organization and you're going to be sending out mailers, your advertisements with the information. If someone gets that information, you obviously have their information. The ability to get off of that list, to take away their personal information, has to be easy. So again, in the audit, all of this information is stuff that you are going to have to provide and that you are going to have to present to the auditor to prove that you are meeting GDPR. Now, this idea of gathering and removing information is important, but the auditors are really going to spend most of their time with securing the data. So the consent is important, but also the security is important. Now, GDPR talks about this idea of accountability. Accountability has a lot of different points, and everything that you see here is directly from GDPR. I'm not about to sit here and read this for you. You can do that on your own. But what I want to do is I want to highlight some things. Data must be processed, okay? So the information about the human that you do something with must be lawfully, fairly, and in a transparent manner to the data subject, which is the human. So when you're processing the information, you have to be an open book. You have to tell them what you're going to do with the information, okay? Now, data is collected for a specific purpose, and you cannot do anything with the data beyond that, okay? Here it goes back to the consent. Now what we're doing is we're tying some things together. When you collect information about a human, you must tell them what you're going to do with it. They consent to what you told them. If you do something else with the data, that is illegal. You can do more information with the data, but you must get consent for that additional processing. All of that has to be out there, okay? There is this concept of data minimization. This minimization is you can only collect what you need. You can't ask 20 questions and get 20 data points about a human if you only need 3. This is minimizing what you're collecting. The overall purpose of GDPR is so that you protect information about people, and what you're protecting is minimal, so that if you are breached, the less information is actually public. That's what it is. Data must be accurate and kept up to date. So you now are responsible for making sure that the information you're collecting is kept up to date. Obviously, birthdays don't change, right? But if you have other information that could be changing, like employment status or something like that, then you have to make sure that that's kept up to date. It's your responsibility because you're collecting the information. Now, all of this information you're collecting, you're not going to do anything with it beyond what you say. You're going to only collect what you need. You're going to make sure it's accurate, and you're only going to keep it for the time that you need it, and then you're going to purge it. So if you only are going to do a marketing campaign for 6 months, when you're done, you must delete the data, and you must delete it securely. When you store it, it's secure. When you process it, it's secure. When you delete it, it's secure and it's gone. All of this is part of GDPR. This is the accountability factor. You must do the correct thing with personal information. Okay? Now, with regard to the personal information, you must protect it at all costs. So you must adopt certain measures to make sure that you are protecting it. Well, first, you need to know what you're protecting. You need to identify it. Many of you on this webinar right now already have personal data. You must go find it and organize it. It is my best recommendation that you isolate it. Everything that you do to meet GDPR must be done to every location where GDPR is stored. So let's say that you have 500 servers. If you have GDPR on 500 of those servers, then you must secure 500 of those servers to meet GDPR. If, however, you only store it on one server of the 500 don't have to be secured at the GDPR level, only the one. So this is where now we can actually save some IT business cycles in terms of what we need to do. So I would isolate the information because you also have to encrypt it, okay? Now, you must deal with the permissions. I call them the access control list, right? As IT people, we call them ACLs, access control list. But it's really just a permission. So you must provide the proper access and review the access, okay? Now again, this is GDPR, but I guarantee you every auditor is going to make sure that you provisioned it correctly and that you maintain it, all right? You're going to maintain it by auditing. You are going to set up auditing, and you're going to track and monitor access to GDPR data. You're going to make sure that the information that you are storing is constantly ongoing, as GDPR says, secured. Everything about it is secured. You must also have the ability to restore the data. We hit another bullet point here. So not only must you store the information, but if for some reason that information is deleted or compromised, you must be able to restore the data back to the original. So you can't say, yeah, I restored the data, but the data that was backed up was the old data. Nope, doesn't meet GDPR. Everything must be backed up correctly. Now, I think this isn't going to be an issue for us. Every one of us on this webinar knows that backup is the most important thing about our job. We must keep live, current information available so that if something goes wrong, then we can restore it back to the most recent state. All of us know that. But GDPR is just pointing that out, and we must be responsible for that. Now, along the lines of technical and organizational measures, one point that we've already talked about is data minimization. Okay, that is just making sure that you collect what you need. There's also this concept of pseudonymization. That's a very tough word to say. We can all practice that together. Pseudonymization. This is the idea that the data that you are collecting, if possible, and should be separated from the actual human, okay? To where you try to isolate it whenever possible. So it says, exactly from GDPR, the processing of personal data in such a manner that the personal data can no longer be attributed to a specific data subject, the human, without the use of additional information. So you're basically isolating this from the human when you process it, okay? So that's pseudonymization. I like to say that word. I practiced it actually. All right, now you must test, and make sure by testing and evaluating that your security measures of the processing are in place. Think of this as intrusion detection, right? And you're testing, you're pen testing. You're testing that the security measures of what you're processing of data are always in place. It's a constant process, okay? An auditor can come in and ask you, all right, for the last 6 months, show me everything you've done to prove that your security of your personal information is up to speed. And you're going to have to show that, okay? Now, we also have this idea of breach detection. So everything we've talked about so far is the idea that you must protect the data. You must find it, isolate it, secure it. The security of the processing must be in place. You must have a backup. You must test the backup. All of these things must be in place. You must also deal with consent. Everything that you gather must be an open book. Everything that you are dealing with must be presented to the human. They're going to agree to that, and you can't do anything more with it. So those are the rules of engagement so far. Then you must deal with breach detection. Now, with regard to breaches, this is after May, okay? So you put all these things in place, you've secured everything, but as we all know, breaches occur. Breaches will always occur because we can't patch everything. We can't secure everything that is going to completely secure the data. There's only one way to deny a breach, and that is wipe everything away from a computer that we have, take that computer and bury it 5 foot in the ground and never touch it again. That's the only way, because the reality is these hackers, the attackers, are good, and they're going to come up with new ways to attack us and breach our information. So GDPR is not saying if you're breached, you're in trouble. It's not what they're saying at all. What they're saying is you must make sure that the minimum measures are taken to secure the data. And if you are breached, you must prove that you have them in place. Then you must also run reports. I'm going to show you some of the details around breaches and what you have to do soon, okay? No penalty, this is in GDPR, for a breach will be invoked unless the breach could have been prevented, no auditing was performed, and minimum measures were not taken, I should say, were not taken, okay? If you didn't take the minimum measures, you're going to get fined. If you're not auditing and you don't really know what happened, you're going to get fined. Are you going to get fined to 20 million euro? I don't know. That depends on the auditor and how they actually implement this. So there are going to be levels of penalties, but the maximum can be 20 million euro or 4%. So if you are just completely oblivious, not paying attention, don't care about it, you're a huge organization and you're breached, GDPR information is out there, you're going to get in trouble. Okay? All right. Now, with regard to breaches, you also have post-breach. So we're going to take measures to not be breached, but unfortunately, breaches are going to occur. Hopefully, no one on this webinar is breached, but someone is going to be breached at some point after May 2018. If that occurs, when that occurs, you are going to have to aggregate the events related to the breach. Okay? That is a requirement. You must have tools in place to aggregate what happened, because you have to write a report and submit it to the supervisory authority within 72 hours. Okay, you have 3 days. You must describe the nature of the breach. You must say what happened, what consequences occurred. You must also take measures and document them in the post-breach document of what you did to address them, so no further breach can occur. All of this must be in place. So let's summarize everything about GDPR. You must organize the data. You must secure the data. Okay? With securing of the data, that means that you're going to have groups that have access to the data, and those groups are placed on the access control list. You must monitor, audit changes to both the access control list and the groups. You must also put security in place for backups, restoration, and you must also make sure that those things are tested. You must also put things in place for breach detection. So you must have tools in place to detect a breach. Okay? So here's what I want to do. I want to walk you through, especially after the last 6 weeks of talking with many of you, my summary of what you're going to need to put in place. Okay? So we're going to walk through a bunch of configurations, and I'm going to try to highlight in a very logical way what you must have in place. All right? So we're going to jump out into a live environment. And first of all, we're going to dive into Active Directory users and computers. Here's my initial recommendations for what you need to put in place. Let's talk about access to resources. Okay? My recommendation is, believe it or not, I haven't done this yet, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to suggest that you create a GDPR organizational unit. In that GDPR organizational unit, you are going to create groups. Okay? Okay? So you will see that I'm creating and isolating GDPR information. This is going to be easier for you when you have to generate reports. Okay? So you'll notice that I have groups, and I'm going to put users in those groups. So step 1 is create the control mechanism for GDPR data. 2, you're going to need to go into your servers, and you are going to be creating, wherever you have documents, you are going to be creating isolated areas for GDPR. Okay? So we have isolation of GDPR data. We have isolation of GDPR groups that are going to access this. Now, when we go into the GDPR information and we set up the access control list, you're going to be adding the GDPR groups to this. Okay, this is the setup. This is the foundational concepts around GDPR. Okay, you isolate the data, you isolate who has access, you're going to configure it. Now that you have this configured, now what you have is something in place This is what you have in place to control and secure the information. Of course, you also want to come in here and you are going to you're going to encrypt the data, okay? So encryption of the data is also going to occur. All right, so we've encrypted the data, we've isolated the data, we've secured the data. Now what you must do is monitor the access, okay? Now, in order to do this, our best recommendation is for you to set up auditing. Now, let me show you where this is. If I go into group policy management, in group policy, you have under your computer policies, you have security settings. So under your security settings, you have this thing called local policies and you have the audit policy. This right here, object access, is for access to files and folders. It's more than that, but in our scope of what we're talking about. We also have to deal with account management because we're going to have to monitor if those groups that have access to the access control list change. Everything that you set up in here needs to target both the file server where the GDPR data is located and the groups wherever the groups are located, which is going to be an Active Directory. So the account management has to be for both the file server, because if a local administrator has access to the data, which it will, and also inside of Active Directory. The object access is going to be targeted towards the file server. When you set that up, the end result shows up here inside of the event viewer, the security log on the machine where the access occurred. Okay? So this is dealing with GDPR data, the monitoring of the access. I'm not going to go into detail about how painful that would be to attempt to try to use this information in this interface. There are no reports. This will not work. There are no reports. There are so many loopholes and issues with the security log inside of Event Viewer, you are going to notice that you cannot use this. So what you need are tools that are going to go in and help you monitor this. Okay, I'm going to talk about some different tools here. First, I'm going to talk about ADAudit Plus. ADAudit Plus gives you reports on things that are changing, okay, with regard to GDPR data. This is part of your breach responsibilities. You must have reports of access to GDPR information, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to come in here and you are going to add in your servers that have GDPR data so that you can actually monitor the access to them. So you'll notice Windows file servers and you're going to add them in here. Then you are going to set up reports to know and track what's happening. And you can even set up alerts to tell you when things change. Okay? Now, as an alternative to that, you might already have ADAudit Plus, and in ADAudit Plus, which also digs information out of the security log, you can do file auditing. So again, you can come in here, configure your Windows file servers. ADAudit Plus also can deal with NetApp and EMC, and you are going to bring the information in here so that you can run reports on access to files, okay? So what I need to be able to do is go in, and let's see if I have any changes in here. I've been dealing with Active Directory so much, I don't really see, let's see if I have anything in here. Oh, duh. Let's go to, I should have some information right here. And also, let's see what I have in here. Let's see what I got, all right? So this tells you that something changed, right? A modified here. So when you are breached, for example, if you are breached, you are going to have to provide this type of report back over time to prove that you know what was breached. So you need to be able to track this information, whether it be in the file audit in ADAudit Plus or inside of File Audit Plus. They both are doing the same thing, okay? File Audit Plus is in real time, where here in ADAudit Plus, this has a little bit of a lag when you're dealing with the file auditing inside of ADAudit Plus. The AD portion is real time, but the file portion is not. That's one of the main differences between the two. I don't care what you use. All I'm saying is you need a tool that can do this, okay? You also need a tool that can track changes to your GDPR groups. So what I need is I need the ability to have a tool like ADAudit Plus that can give me reports on if I have changes. You will see right here, GDPR Modify Access group was modified. Here's a report of this. I can actually come in here and search just on group type, right? So these are groups that are changing. And right here, you see everything is GDPR. So I can do searches. And I now, with a click, can actually produce some of these reports as a PDF, HTML, whatever it is. This is part of your responsibility. Okay, so let's summarize what we've done so far. We went into Active Directory and we created an OU and groups. We went into our file system and we created a folder for GDPR. We configured the access control list on the folder. Now that that's set up, now we need tools that can track the access to the GDPR data and give us reports on things that are changing, on things that have access that are on the access control list. These are core requirements of GDPR. These are things you must have in place. All right? Now, other things that you must have in place. Breach detection. ADAudit Plus doesn't do breach detection. Well, what does breach detection? Well, let me show you a tool that does breach detection. Over here, this is EventLog Analyzer. All right? This is a SIM. Inside of the SIM, you're going to be responsible for configuring, okay? We log back in, for configuring the devices that have GDPR data, okay? So you come in here and you add a new device, and that new device is going to have GDPR data. Excellent. Now that the device is added, now you must go in and specify which applications, databases primarily, have the GDPR stored. So here we go in and we can say, okay, it's a SQL server, it's an Oracle database, whatever it is. So as we go through, you need to deal with ACLs, files and folders, groups, setup, and auditing. And now we're dealing with the breach detection. Breach. If I were to ask you to list all the ways that you can be breached, I don't think you can do it for me. But what I want to show you is the core minimums of what you're going to need to do for the areas that you know about. We don't know every area that we can be breached, but what we're trying to do at a minimum is configure a world where we can track things and we can secure things. For example, I want to go in and get reports. And so here's where I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to go back in time from August 1, and I'm going to go through hold on one second. I'm going to go through October 27th. Okay? Now, you will see that I am detecting when a firewall rule is modified or added. This is a breach. This is a way to detect breaches. Now, this could be valid, but the idea is that you have to track it. You have to run reports and give them in post-breach write-ups. So you have to do this. So all the areas that you're aware of that you can be breached, you have to have tools like EventLog Analyzer to run reports if these things change. You also need to run reports, for example, if your web server is attacked. So if not only your web server, but if your database is attacked, like a SQL injection, right? SQL injection is part of what we have inside of EventLog Analyzer. We can actually tell you if the SQL queries have the same structure as a SQL injection. This is what this is doing. You'll see here, there's 3 of them. September 11th, September 5th of this year, this particular database had a SQL injection attack. This is telling you that. If you find out that this is a GDPR database and things were jeopardized and breached, you're going to have to generate this report. You're going to have to go to the report with regard to your firewall and produce all of this. This is a requirement according to GDPR. You're then going to have to go into your other tools, right? You're going to have to go into ADAudit Plus, and you're going to have to go through and filter out the changes that occurred, right? So for group management, and you're going to have to go through and modify groups, and you're going to have to go through this. My recommendation is you actually generate reports inside of ADAudit Plus just for GDPR groups. Just for GDPR groups. Easy to do that with a tool like this. This way, you can go to those reports and you can just look at that information. For example, I have reports on modified admin groups. It's only modified admin groups. If I want to look at only modified admin groups, I can get that report. I can export this as a PDF. This is isolating that behavior. The same thing into your files. You're going to have to generate reports in a post-breach situation. So these are tools that I'm going to recommend that you put in place. At a minimum, you need ADAudit Plus, you need FileAudit Plus, you need Log 360, which actually includes ADAudit Plus, and EventLog Analyzer. With these tools, you now have the arsenal to help you configure, monitor, and report when things change and if you're breached. This is what you must put in place. Now, we've gone through a lot of information here, a tremendous amount of information in a short amount of time. But in summary, we talked about groups, access control lists, files and folders, tracking, reporting, and alerting, and dealing with breach access. That's really what we just talked about. And I gave you the secret decoder ring. So here's what I recommend to you. And again, this is what you're going to have to do. Don't delay on this, please. I'm going to suggest that you go to our website, okay, ManageEngine.com, and you're going to go to products, and you're going to download the tools that I just talked about, okay? You're going to download EventLog Analyzer, ADAudit Plus, FileAudit Plus, okay? You're going to configure them, and you're going to set up a test GDPR environment, and then you're going to set up the tracking and alerting, and you're going to see how to generate these reports. I want all of you to report back to me how long that took you, because I think it's going to take you less than 4 hours. Okay? Now, think about that. You can take action today and you can test GDPR data in your environment and get results in less than 4 hours. That's quite spectacular. That's how easy these tools are. Now, when you download these tools from our website, these tools that I'm pointing you to here are 100% full-blown tools. They are not a partial tool. You have a full 30 days to test this out. You only need 4 hours, okay? So please take action on this. This is important. Don't wait to 2018 to start this. Now's the time. All of us on this webinar know the holidays are coming up. Holidays are a little bit slower for most IT shops. Now is the time to take action. Please go take action on this. I've given you the secret decoder ring on what to set up and how to set it up. I've given you the secret decoder ring on how to monitor and what you need to do to monitor, not only for changes, but also for breaches. You need to run through a couple of tests. What I would do is get a team together to set all this up and then have one team perform an attack. They're not going to tell you when they attack, but I want you to see what that looks like in the alerts. Then after the attack, you go through, generate the reports, and put it into a document. You're ready. Come May, you'll be ready. No matter what is happening, you'll be ready. So you need Log 360. You need AD Manager Plus for the configuration, right? It's much easier with AD Manager Plus. And then ADAudit Plus, which is part of the Log 360, and EventLog Analyzer can help you with the tracking and the breach detection. Amazing what you can do with a 4-hour install and test. Very powerful. Now, other things that you can do inside of EventLog Analyzer is you can have email alerts sent out when things happen. So this is an example of our SQL injection. You'll see right here, SQL injection. You can get an email in your inbox. So these are things that you can do now to go in and make sure that you are prepared for GDPR. So let's summarize what we went through. First, we went through the idea that you need to set up groups, set up OUs, isolate your data. You then need to make sure that you track all of it and alert on all of it so you can run reports. You also need to do the same thing with your data. Set up isolation of your data, set up the ACLs, and then monitor. You then need to set up breach detection. With all of that, you are golden. You are set. So what you can do now is take action. And again, you have my email address, right? Derek@ManageEngine.com. Go out to our website, download this, and test it out. I encourage all of you to report back to me. If it takes you more than 4 hours to do this, I want you to tell me how long it took. If it takes you more than 4 hours, I'll be completely shocked. But I want you dedicated 4 hours to this. Go set this up. But imagine you can be ready in May with 4 hours of work. All right? So with that, I see that there have been some questions coming through. I think my great support has done an awesome job answering your questions. I don't think there are any more outstanding questions. But if there are, you have my email, okay? Please email me with any questions. Derek@ManageEngine.com. If you have any questions in general for the ADSolutions team, just email us. All of us love to receive emails because we are working constantly trying to answer your questions and give you solutions. We have a team dedicated to GDPR. If you go to our website, you'll see GDPR documentation. We have lots of documents to help you with GDPR. You've probably been receiving emails about it. So please look at our blog, look at our newsletters, look at our website to help you guide you through GDPR. If you take those guides and what I've walked through today, you'll actually be able to implement a GDPR solution very quickly that's very robust, okay? That way you're prepared. For those of you on this call that are in Europe, and I think it's most of you, keep an eye out for our world tour in 2018. We'll be coming back and we will be focusing on GDPR. So that way you have a one-to-one opportunity to ask us questions in those seminars. You can talk to the partners, talk to your local representatives about GDPR as well. These are things that we're offering to you. We will be having more webinars on GDPR, talking about more details and giving you more setup instruction as we go through the rest of 2017 and into 2018. Keep an eye out for those too. So that concludes our webinar. I really hope it was useful for you. I hope it gave you some insights and some direction on where you can go. Again, email me. You have a lot of resources to use. And with that, I want to thank all of you for attending. I want to thank all of my team members in the background for helping answer those questions and guide us through this. And for Derek and the rest of the ADSolutions team, until we meet again, thank you so much and have a great rest of your day. And I hope to see you soon on a webinar or in a seminar. Thank you so much.